So here we are. I'm not actually going to be doing a glue up today because I just found that I do not have the clamps that I need, but I can walk you through the steps on how to get a good glue up. Before I do any glue up, I want to get everything rough assembled. That way I can make sure that there's nothing that might prevent this from going together once I get the glue on. So I've taken and I've got the two sides in. I've got the tenons all nice and fit. I want to make sure that I have everything labeled really well. I actually have transferred the marks of which leg is which onto the end grain because once this goes together, nobody's ever going to see it. I've also labeled the end grain on the top. That way I know that this is side B, it'll align with side B, and I also know which direction is the top. Because most of you should have tails that are protruding through the top of your surface, you're going to want to make what's called a caul. That way you can get nice, good, consistent pressure down on your dovetails. So what I'm going to do, or what you need to do, is take a scrap piece of wood and just mark where those pins are coming up. And I want to mark a little proud of where they're at. Because remember that those pins flare at the back. I'm going to just mark where those stick out through. And I'm going to do this at both ends. That one I don't really need to mess with, but then I'm going to take and just mark where I'm going to cut stuff off. It is really easy the first couple of times you make these to cut out the wrong spot. I want to have contact down here on the pins, or on the tails. I don't want to have any material here in the pin area, any pressure on the pins. So I would just take a handsaw and a chisel and chop those out. Again, since I'm not doing the actual glue up because I don't have the clamps, I'm not actually going to chop that out. So now I'm going to try putting my top on. It's a fairly tight fit. I want to make sure that I tap everything down. That way I can also check to make sure I don't have any schmutz in these corners that I might need to remove. At this point, if I've sanded this top surface and gotten rid of most of the shop rash, I want to take a scrap piece of wood and tap it down. There we go. So that all looks really good. Once I get everything seated with the glue on, I would then take my cauls, set it up like this, make sure that there's nothing touching these pins up here, and clamp from the flat spot that I left on the bottom of my leg up to the top. And do that on top and bottom on both sides, and then I put some very light pressure if I have an extra clamp right here in the middle. I don't want to super tighten that because I run the risk of splitting these legs, and that's a pain to fit or fix. I just want to give a little bit of a tight squeeze to close any gaps that I might have. Once I get all the clamps on, I can check for square everything if I cut my joinery correctly, and I'm not being a gorilla when tightening the clamps. Everything should go together just fine. Usually when I'm putting glue on, I will only put glue on the tail pieces themselves. I don't put any glue on the pins. Generally all of the glue that's on the pins will just get squeezed down and out into the joint, and then it creates havoc trying to clean that up after I've already sanded and prepped this area. If you're worried about that and you want to put glue on both the pins and the tails, that's fine. you can run some blue painter's tape on your scribe lines, and that will allow you to clean stuff up a little bit better. Resist the urge, if you do get squeezed out in here, to take a wet rag and wipe it, because that will just spread the glue into the fibers, and then it's really hard to get that out. For this, I would just use regular Titebond. You can, if you're worried about glue up time, because you have about 5 minutes work time with this, you could use a Titebond Extend, or Titebond 3 has a pretty long open time, but for this little project, you should be able to get everything done in 5 minutes. So, if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to me. I'm always available to help if I can walk you through stuff. If you do notice that you have some gaps on this, before you glue up, I can show you how to do some wedges in there. But once you get this glued up, I would resist the urge of putting some wedges in there, unless you've got a pretty consistent gap on both the top and the bottom. If that's the case, then you can just tap a couple of wedges in at the top and bottom.